It was supposed to be a quick operation. The US targeted key Houthi leaders with aerial strikes designed to cut off the group's collective head. Now, those strikes have the potential to explode into an all-out war. As the US bombs Yemen, the Houthis are targeting Israel. The situation in the Middle East is heating up by the day, with the latest round of US airstrikes drawing out a more direct response from the Houthis. On March 26, the Houthis claimed that several US airstrikes battered northern Yemen. The militant group, which has spent over a year attacking commercial vessels sailing through the Red Sea in a supposed attempt to support Palestine, says that the US carried out 17 strikes. Most of those strikes hit Sadaa, which is in the country's northwest near the border with Saudi Arabia, while others hit Amran. The latter is an important city for the Houthi militants. In 2014, Amran was among the first cities the group managed to capture when it started its campaign against Yemen's government. That capture both ignited the civil war that has marred Yemen ever since, and provided the Houthis with a pathway into Sadaa, which the Houthis now control. The Houthi Ansarullah website offers a few more details. It says that the US warplanes carried out aggressive air raids, causing material damage to citizens' properties. A further update from the Al Masira TV, a Yemeni station affiliated with the Houthis, claims that the majority of the raids targeted the eastern part of Sadaa along with the Al Salem district. As for Amran, the US conducted 2 raids in the city, both of which targeted the Sufyan district. Add to this the 5 strikes US fighter jets carried out against the Sahar district, which lies west of Sadaa, on March 25, and it all adds up to a concerted campaign to take out key Houthi targets. Of course, the Houthis aren't letting anybody know just how successful the US strikes are. Its report of the March 26 attack only mentioned damage to civilian buildings, likely in an attempt to paint the US as an aggressor who is targeting innocent Yemeni civilians. It made no mention of any casualties, either among civilians or the Houthi leadership. However, local residents are believed to have reported explosions caused by the strikes. Plus, each of the regions the US targeted are well-known military sites, suggesting that these were far more precise strikes than the Houthis would like the rest of the world to believe. The lack of reporting on casualties also doesn't come as a surprise. Though the Houthis happily use instances of civilian casualties to prop up their propaganda efforts against the US and its allies, they're far more reticent about the deaths of those within the group. That makes sense. The group doesn't want to give any leverage to the US by confirming kills for it. The March 26 strike is the latest in a string that has occurred daily since mid-March, and it looks like those strikes have been effective. According to the Jerusalem Post, the Al Ain media outlet, which is based in the United Arab Emirates, says that the American strikes caused heavy losses among the Iranian-backed Houthis. According to the outlet's report, the US military has intensified its airstrikes on Houthi militia bases, facilities and command centers in their main stronghold in the Sadaa governorate, northern Yemen. That governorate is important. It's among the largest in Yemen, with a population of around 50,000 people, and it borders US ally Saudi Arabia. It appears that the US's goal with these strikes is to destroy the hideouts the occupying Houthi forces use in the governorate, either forcing them out into the open or killing the group's leaders. True figures are difficult to come by. The US is keeping as tight-lipped as it can about the exact nature of its strikes and who it's targeting, assuming we ignore the leaked signal chat that announced the first of the strikes 2 hours before they happened. The US committed one of its biggest military blunders in recent memory when it invited the Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeff Goldberg to a group conversation outlining the need for the strikes and the plans that would bring them to fruition. Right now, several members of that single group chat are being quizzed about how they allowed this vital leak to happen. Perhaps that's why we're not getting any in-depth details of the precise strikes the US is carrying out from the US itself. However, we do have some idea of the damage being caused. On March 16, the day after the US strike started, The Guardian reported that the initial attacks had killed at least 31 people and likely injured around 100 more. Those initial strikes were followed by a warning from US President Donald Trump. To all Houthi terrorists, Trump posted to the Truth Social platform, "Your time is up and your attacks must stop, starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you've ever seen before." But by March 17th, the death toll in Yemen had risen to 53, according to the BBC. The Houthis also claimed that the attacks had hurt civilians, with 5 children being among the 53 killed. Again, there was no confirmation from the Houthis about whether the airstrikes had killed any of their leaders. The US provided few details outside of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's claims that the strikes targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out. More deaths have since been reported. On March 25, Arab News reported that strikes conducted the day before pounded sites across the country into early Tuesday. The Houthis claimed those strikes killed 2 people while injuring over a dozen others, but again, it didn't reveal whether any of the casualties came from the Houthi ranks. Trump has been characteristically bullish following the latest round of strikes. On March 27, the Times of Israel reported that the US president believes the US strikes are having such a profound impact that it won't be long before the Houthis are begging for peace. On March 26, Fox News covered Trump speaking to the press about the matter.
The Houthis are looking to do something. They want to know, how do we stop? Can we have peace? The Houthis want peace because they're getting the hell knocked out of them. It's been very, very strong. The Houthis are dying for peace. They don't want this. And they're bad. Look, they were knocking ships out of the ocean. You know, we had in the Suez Canal, they only have about 20% of the ships going through. They have to go through a different way, which takes weeks of travel. And that really affects commerce. But the Houthis have been hit hard and they want to negotiate peace.
Though slightly rambling, the comments reveal that Trump believes the Houthis are now on the back foot, along with highlighting one of the US's reasons for the attacks. But there's a problem. While Trump claims the Houthis are practically begging for peace, the militant group is claiming that it's conducting its own strikes against both the US and Israel. Those Houthi claims came in the wake of its announcement of the most recent 17 US strikes. Posting to X, Houthi spokesman Yahya Saree commented that the group had attacked the USS Harry S. Truman, which is a US aircraft carrier stationed in the Red Sea from which the US is carrying out its aerial strikes. The spokesman also claimed that the Houthis had conducted retaliatory drone strikes on Israeli military sites in Tel Aviv. The confrontation and clashes continued for several hours, claimed Saree, before he added that the Houthis would continue to counter escalation with escalation. So, what do we know about these Houthi attacks? Not a huge amount, as it turns out. And the Houthis may even be lying about their retaliatory response. According to the Palestine Chronicle, Saree made grand claims that the Houthis carried out something akin to a joint military operation involving its missile force, air force, and naval forces. The USS Harry S. Truman was the central target, with Saree claiming that the missile operation against the ship achieved its objectives. The problem here is twofold. Saree didn't say what those objectives were, and he made no mention of the extent of the damage caused, assuming there was any, to the massive aircraft carrier. If the goal was to sink the USS Harry S. Truman, then that certainly hasn't happened. Marine Vessel Traffic's live tracker shows that it's still stationed in the Red Sea, meaning whatever missile strikes the Houthis supposedly launched haven't caused any ongoing issues. The US certainly hasn't confirmed an attack, at least not one that's done any damage. So we can only conclude that the Houthi attack on the aircraft carrier, assuming one happened at all, was ineffectual. Perhaps the Houthi objective was to engage the USS Harry S. Truman's defenses, prohibiting aircraft from taking off and thus relieving the pressure in Yemen. That's a possibility, but if that's the case, the attack only engaging the carrier for a couple of hours, as Saree claims it did, won't do much to prevent future airstrikes. As for the drone assault on Israel, Saree's again not especially forthcoming with specific details. The Houthi spokesman claims that the drone operation against Israel resulted in the Houthis successfully hitting their intended targets. But, as was the case with his report on the USS Harry S. Truman attacks, Saree provided no details about any damage the Houthis managed to inflict. The reality is that there likely wasn't any damage at all in either case. The Jerusalem Post points out that the US hasn't reported any clashes or skirmishes between its forces and the Houthi militants. As for the supposed drone attack on Israel, nothing was reported by the Israel Defense Force at the time Saree claims the attacks happened. Is it all smoke and mirrors coming from a desperate Houthi militia that is getting pelted with US bombs and missiles? Perhaps. However, we can't discount the possibility that the Houthis at least attempted a drone assault on Israel. After all, it has sent several drones to attack the country in the days since the US began its airstrikes. On March 21, the Jerusalem Post reported that red alert sirens were sounding across Israel due to a ballistic missile fired from Yemen, though that missile didn't get very far, as the Israeli Air Force intercepted and destroyed it. However, debris from the missile ended up falling onto the town of Dhahiriya, which is located near Hebron, so the Houthi missile managed to break through into Israeli territory, even if it ended up being shot out of the skies. The most notable thing about this March 21 attack is that it marked the third time in the space of a week that the Houthis had attempted to target Jerusalem with missiles and drones. These 3 attacks come on the back of a 2-month pause in hostilities, suggesting that the ongoing US airstrikes are pushing the Houthis into launching attacks against Israel. Perhaps the militant group blames Israel for the airstrikes due to its close defense ties with the US. It's difficult to tell, however, the fact that these earlier attacks are confirmed lends some credence to Saree's claims that the Houthis sent drones to Israel on March 26, even if those drones didn't achieve whatever objectives the Houthis had for them. One thing is clear, the US isn't going to stop its devastating airstrikes against the Houthis anytime soon, and as long as those strikes continue, the situation in the Middle East will keep heating up. The Houthis may focus more attacks on Israel while doing whatever little they can to cause issues with the USS Harry S. Truman. All of this brings us to a question. Why is the US using airstrikes to combat the Houthis in the first place? Trump offered the first answer when he mentioned that the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea are affecting commerce. Since Israel announced its war against Hamas in Gaza following the October 2023 Hamas terrorist attack that killed 1,200 people, the Houthis have been attacking commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea. These attacks, the group claims, are designed to show their solidarity with Palestine and the Hamas militant Israel is trying to eradicate. The Houthis are targeting vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, specifically because commercial shipping companies use them to avoid having to take much longer journeys around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. According to Hildebrand Gorey, these efforts are having a pronounced impact on shipping between Europe and Asia. When the Red Sea is open, European ships can cut over 10 days off their sailing time by passing through it via the Suez Canal. Without the Red Sea, they have to travel an extra 3,500 nautical miles to pass around the Cape of Good Hope. Longer journeys mean shipping companies are spending more on wages and fuel. Plus, global supply chains are being affected by the delays, which create secondary costs elsewhere. There are other economic consequences of the Houthi attacks. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, cargo insurance rates for any ship attempting to pass through the Red Sea have rocketed since the Houthis started launching their attacks. Where it once cost 0.6% of the value of the cargo a ship held to get insured, it's now costing 2%. Most of the massive container ships passing through the Red Sea contain millions of dollars of cargo, meaning insurance rates more than doubling is another drain on resources. Other consequences are felt outside the direct shipping industry. For instance, CSIS reports that in January 2024, the number of passages through the Suez Canal, which connects to the Red Sea, was down to just 63% of the levels seen the previous year. Fewer passages mean less money made. Egypt reported that revenues generated by the canal were down 40% in January 2024, which, when combined with the Egyptian government's challenges with domestic inflation at the time, also means that Egypt is getting its hands on less and more valuable foreign currencies. The Houthis have launched at least 100 attacks against commercial shipping vessels since they started their Red Sea campaign in late 2023. The group claims that every vessel it attacks is linked to Israel. However, those links are often tenuous at best. And even if the group is telling the truth, the chaos it's causing in the Red Sea has a clear impact on the global commercial shipping industry. That alone might have been enough of a reason for the US to conduct its strikes. In fact, it was reason enough in 2024. The US, alongside the UK, formed a coalition to carry out initial strikes against Houthi positions in January of that year. The strikes had an impact, making the Red Sea a little safer for commercial vessels. However, they stopped alongside the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea in early 2025, when Israel and Hamas announced that a ceasefire was coming into effect. That ceasefire paused the 15-month conflict between the two and removed the Houthis' justification for carrying out their Red Sea strikes. And if that truce had held, we likely would be reporting on more attacks right now. Unfortunately, the truce between Hamas and Israel fell apart. Fighting is raging again, and that fighting led to the Houthis' March 12 announcement that they would again start targeting vessels traveling through the Red Sea. We hope it's understood that the actions taken by the Houthi military stem from a deep sense of religious, humanitarian, and moral responsibility toward the oppressed Palestinian people and aim to pressure the Israeli usurper entity to reopen the crossings to the Gaza Strip and allow the entry of aid, including food and medical supplies, the group said in a press statement. 3 days later, US bombs started falling in Yemen. We also can't ignore one of the other reasons the US is conducting these strikes, along with why the Houthis are attempting to counter: Iran. According to Radio Free Europe, or RFE, the current wave of US airstrikes are designed to deliver a direct message to the militant group's main backer. Trump practically said as much on March 17th in a Truth Social post. The hundreds of attacks made by the Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran, he wrote. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. It appears that Trump is attempting to use the attacks on the Houthis to push Iran into nuclear weapons negotiations with the United States, according to the head of intelligence at Lebeck International, Michael Horowitz. He tells RFE, there is a message being sent in the type of weapons used, including sea-launched missiles, Horowitz claims. Nuclear negotiations haven't started, and Trump is threatening to use force if diplomacy doesn't work. This is a way to show that he's serious. In other words, the US is making an example of the Houthis to force Iran to come to the table. And given that the militant group has close ties to Iran, which is believed to provide weapons and training to the Houthis, the US may see strikes as a means to hit Iran via one of its proxies. Iran certainly seems to think so. In the wake of the initial US airstrikes, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that the US government has no authorities or business dictating Iranian foreign policy. That seems to be an admission that Iran has links to the Houthis, even though it claims that it has no role in the militant group's decision-making. After all, the US isn't attacking Iran directly. What Iranian foreign policy could it be affecting if it's focusing its airstrikes on Yemen and the Red Sea? The answer is that it's hindering Iran's ability to expand its influence in the Middle East, which it does in part by using the Houthis to terrorize ships in the Red Sea. Amidst all of this geopolitical wrangling, it's the Yemeni people who are suffering the most. Al Jazeera's Mohammed Al-Attab reported from Sana'a in the wake of the US's latest airstrike. The reality for many Yemenis remains bleak, he said. The war ongoing since 2015 has plunged nearly 20 million people into poverty, with nearly 7 million people facing famine. Yet, despite all of this devastation, it appears many in Yemen want to continue supporting Palestine. For them, standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people is a cause worth enduring hardship for, even as their country grapples with relentless US strikes. And those strikes certainly are relentless. The March 26 attacks are just the latest in 11 days of constant US aerial bombardments against the Houthis in Yemen. Something has to give. Will the US continue these attacks until it's wiped the Houthi leadership out completely? Or will the Houthis continue their assaults on commercial shipping and counterattacks against the US and Israel, potentially bringing Iran into the frame and igniting an even more terrifying Middle East crisis? Tell us what you think the answers to these questions might be in the comments below, along with sharing your thoughts about the US airstrikes and the Houthi counterattacks. Is the US justified in carrying out these strikes? Do you see them escalating into something more? Share your opinions with us, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show, an independent source for news about the latest developments in the Middle East, Ukraine, and around the globe.